If you're a young Zoomer who finds yourself struggling in this pathetic American economy, there is nothing that has contributed to your ongoing enslavement more than the fact that you're literally forced and coerced into having to have a car in America. The average car in America costs about $50,000. Average car payments total out to $770 per month for a new car and $531 for a used one. Average insurance costs about $120 per month. Average gas payments $200 a month. Add this all up and you get a staggering grand total of anywhere between $850 to $1,090 per month that you gotta pay just to have a car. And this isn't even factoring in all the bullshit DMV fees, random ass emergency maintenance fees you gotta pay when your piece of shit engine randomly breaks down. And because you're forced to pay an extra $850 to $1,090 per month just for the cost of having a car, you are forced to work many extra hours just to pay for it. Let's be very generous here and say you're making $20 an hour, which is a lot for a young person these days. That's an extra 40 hours per month, an entire extra work week you gotta slave away just because you're forced to have a car. Let's talk about a concept that's honestly the biggest scam and illusion propping up the joke of an economic system we live in. The free market. Hey, maybe the system isn't perfect, but at the end of the day, it's a free market. No matter how bad you're getting screwed over, you don't have the right to complain about it because you're the one who made these choices. You chose your job, what you buy, how you spend your money, etc. But is this really true? Let's say you're a young person in America who doesn't want to buy a car, who would rather make the wise financial decision of saving money in your 20s instead of blowing thousands per month on car payments. Do you really, honestly, have the choice to not buy a car in America? Public transportation is utter dog shit. There are no metros, trains, or electric streetcars in most cities. The only option you have is a bus that comes once every 45 minutes and still manages to be 30 minutes late every time. And of course, you're the one who gets blamed for it when you're late to work. Speaking of work, employers in America won't even look at you if you don't have a car. After all the usual bullshit ass useless questions in every job interview, hey, why do you want to work for this company? Hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? The next bullshit ass question that inevitably comes along is, do you have a car? You know, we need to make sure you can make it to work on time. You can't work without a car. You can't earn money without a car. And yet, here they are, telling you with a straight face that it's your own voluntary choice to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars every month on a car when they'll literally starve you to death if you don't make that quote-unquote voluntary choice. Now, it's really refreshing to see that so many young people are waking up to the fact that the capitalist system we live in is just a modern form of slavery. You may not be legally forced to work, but you will have your basic survival needs like food and shelter denied if you don't work. You will go homeless and starve if you don't work. It's really just a method of coercion that's changed. Now, the capitalist rebuttal to this is, hey, this isn't capitalism forcing you to work. This is just how it is in nature. You'd have to hunt and gather for food anyways, which, as we've covered many times, is a total and absolute lie, as the actual scientific evidence shows that hunter-gatherer tribes never had to pay rent to live on land and only worked about 2 to 3 hours per day to get all the food they needed. Now, to be fair, although they didn't have to work nearly as much as we work today, they still did have to work to some level. So whether work is modern slavery or just how it is in nature is somewhat debatable. What is not debatable, however, is that they certainly did not need cars to survive. Cars are absolutely not a part of nature. They're absolutely not something people had to work for in nature. They're not even something people had to work for the overwhelming majority of human civilization. They've only existed for about 150 years out of the total 10,000 years human civilization has been around. They're not even a requirement in the overwhelming majority of other countries, even in the modern world today. Most developed OECD countries and even many developing second and third world countries have viable public transportation, walkable cities, and legitimate options to where you do actually have the voluntary choice to not buy a car. So, I know I'm beating a dead horse by now, but hopefully you get the point. There is no reason, no excuse for us to all be forced to buy a car. It is not how it is in nature. It is not how it has been for the majority of human history, and it is not how it is in most other places of the world. So why exactly is it that we're forced and coerced into buying cars in America? Well, get ready for a very interesting history lesson, one that will completely expose expose the scam and lie of the quote-unquote free market. One that will completely change the way you think about the economy and in the process empower you to make the necessary changes to ultimately free yourselves from this disgusting form of modern slavery. So we've just talked about how cars were not needed for the overwhelming majority of human history and for the overwhelming majority of people in the world today. What might surprise you the most, however, is that it wasn't even needed for the majority of American history. Shocking, I know. It's really hard to imagine that today, but there was a time where even America had decent, viable public transportation. For example, in 1970, America had over 45,000 miles of streetcar rail. So what the hell happened? In the late 1930s, General Motors rapidly rose to power, and they saw a huge problem. Good public transit and clean, walkable cities may have been good for the average American, but they were terrible for corporate profits. In fact, it was an existential threat for their corporate profits. And so they saw an opportunity to make massive profits, and they formed a corporate coalition. In fact, let's just call it an illegal cartel, because that's exactly what it was. GM, along with Firestone Tire, Standard Oil, Phillips Petroleum, and several other big names in the car and oil industry, invested heavily in a company called National City Lines. This company had one specific objective in mind: buy up all the electric streetcar companies, sabotage their business, and rapidly replace as many streetcars with buses as possible. Their own GM buses, of course. GM, along with all these other companies, controlled and profited off everything from the diesel fuel to the manufacturing parts to, of course, the buses themselves. This marked the beginning of the end of American public transportation. Hey guys, we noticed something very interesting in the YouTube analytics recently. It appears that the single most important metric for the long-term success of a video isn't actually likes or clicks, it's actually how many people end up subscribing. So, if you found this video important and useful, the best thing you can do to help us get the message out is to simply subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all so much, guys. We really, truly appreciate it. After World War II, the entire global economy transformed radically as countries around the world looked to rebuild themselves from the ground up. This is where the US took a drastically different turn than Europe and Japan. It's important to note that Europe and Japan clearly are not anti-car places. Obviously, plenty of people do drive in Europe and Japan. The difference, however, is that after World War II, Europe and Japan embraced cars just like the United States. However, they also heavily invested in public transit infrastructure like metros, trams, and inner-city trains to give people an alternative to cars as well. The US, on the other hand, had allowed GM to run rampant as a corporate cartel, and as a result, just like we're seeing today, they got their dirty money involved in American politics. They intentionally lobbied the US government to push specific zoning regulations, city layouts, and interstate highways, while minimizing investment in public transportation as much as possible. So the moral of the story is this: the idea that we live in a quote-unquote free market is a complete total joke and a scam. They spent decades before you were even born destroying free market options, destroying public transportation, forcing and coercing you into buying their shitty, overpriced cars, overpriced gas, and overpriced insurance, and then somehow have the gall to turn around with their snarky fake smiles and tell you, hey, no one's forcing you to work these shitty jobs, it's just the free market. This, by the way, is always how free market gaslighting is used to justify the enslavement of young people. Another great example is how you're being forced to pay for these absurdly, unbearably high rent prices these days. Now, you've probably been told that, hey, if you don't like it, you could just go live in the woods or be homeless. But here's the thing, you actually legally cannot live in the woods or choose to be homeless in the United States, as all uninhabited land is technically owned by the government. It's literally written in law that you can't sleep outdoors, set up tents, panhandle, or even sit in certain areas. Now, the point here isn't that it's good to be homeless. Obviously, it's not. The point here is that if you're going to claim you're a quote-unquote free market, people then should have the legal right to choose that option if they want to. Since you're forced to have a car, forced to pay rent, and by extension, forced to work a shitty job you hate to pay for all that, let's just cut out all the bullshit free market sugarcoating. Capitalism is not a free market system. It's a modern day slavery-based economy. Now, the reason I have so much hope in Gen Z is because so many of you are waking up to just how BS this whole thing is. I've seen countless reels on TikTok and Instagram exposing it, and I have nothing else to add other than you're all absolutely right. Now, I do want to address what I feel like is a really stupid and honestly really weird argument that always pops up in the comment section of these reels. I don't know if they're delusional boomers, car industry shills, or people who just have some weird car fetish, but someone always has to pop up in the comments with some variation of, "You'd rather use public transportation? No thanks, I don't want to get stabbed. I'll keep driving my car." Let's first talk about why this argument is really stupid, and then we'll get into why it's just weird. The risk of being stabbed or getting into any life-threatening accident for that matter while taking public transportation is very rare. And that's why when it does happen, it gets so heavily reported and sensationalized. If something like this happened commonly or happened all the time, like for example, car accidents, we wouldn't hear about it on the news a lot. Statistically speaking, you're way more likely to get into a car accident than being stabbed on public transportation. The lifetime risk of dying in a car accident is something like 1%, which is not a statistically insignificant number at all. And those are just the accidents deadly enough to kill you. This doesn't even include all the accidents that severely injure you but don't end up killing you. But beyond being a stupid argument, it's also a really weird point to randomly bring up, because even if cars are objectively more dangerous, nobody who wants better public transportation is telling you that you can't own and drive your own car. Well, maybe not literally nobody. There are some extreme climate activists who will shame you for having a car, but the majority of people I know who want better public transportation don't care one iota if you have a car. They just don't want to be forced to have a car themselves. So I really don't understand why some car owners get so weird and defensive about it. These are the same people constantly going on about freedom, free markets, how America is such a free country, etc. And yet they feel some weird urge to constantly guilt trip, shame, and gaslight you into buying a car, which specifically denies you the freedom of being allowed to enjoy your free time instead of having to work another 50 hours a month just to make car payments, which specifically denies you your free market right to choose not to own a car. It feels like car owners are the new religious zealots at this point. It's not enough that you respect their choice of owning a car. It's not enough that they have their own right and freedom to have a car. They have to show up at your house, knock on your door, and preach to you about all the horrors and dangers of not having a car and why it's such a horrible sin to want better public transportation. And on top of all that, all their arguments that they constantly have to shove down your throat are also horribly wrong according to the actual numbers and statistics anyways. Drive a car if you want, just stop shoving it down my throat too. So with all that being said, what can you actually do about this? Now, the easiest and most obvious solution is to just leave the United States. A lot of you have already realized this, and as a result, Gen Z is already fleeing the US in absolute record numbers right now. And to all of you out there, I just gotta say, respect. However, I do also recognize that not everyone can or wants to just get up and leave. So if that's you, here's what you can do to improve the situation in the US. Now, the first thing I would say is just keep up the pressure. You guys have already been relentlessly advocating for better public transportation all over social media, and you just got to keep up the good work. In fact, double down and get even more relentless about it. The more you share and expose this information on social media and in real life, the more people wake up to this grift, the more people get angry and demand change. This will inevitably create enough political pressure to enact real policy changes, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Los Angeles has already rolled out an initiative investing $120 billion to become a no-car city for the 2028 Olympics. New York is heavily pushing free buses for everyone thanks to their awesome new mayor. And all around the country, we're seeing more and more political candidates who are running away and winning with policies centered around better public transit. All you guys have to do is further double down on what's already working. Keep exposing this grift through social media. Keep voting for candidates that support better public transit. Honestly, this might be the best and most immediate way you can fight for practical, real-life changes. Instead of having vague objectives like we need to fix the economy, having such a specific and defined objective like reducing dependency on cars is a much more achievable and much more harder to argue against goal to have. Now I'll finish this video by asking you one simple question. $102,000. What would an extra $102,000 in your bank account mean to you right now? It's probably a significant life-changing amount of money. Well, that's what's at stake here and what we're fighting for. Remember earlier when we talked about how owning a car costs anywhere between $850 to $1,090 per month? Let's just be very generous here and go with the lower $850 figure. Now, most of you who watch my videos are between the ages of 18 to 30. So let's just say you're a young 20-year-old guy who's now just getting started in life. Let's imagine a universe in which instead of being pressured by your asshole boomer parents and society to get a car, you have decent, reliable European/Asian style trams, trains, and metros to get around. And instead of being forced to pay $850 precious dollars every month in car payments, you're able to simply just save up this money. If we multiply $850 by 12 months in a year, that leaves us with an extra $10,200 we get to save up per year. And this means by the time you're 30, which trust me, the time will pass way sooner than you expect, that is an extra $102,000 you'll have saved up when you wake up one day 10 years later and realize you're now 30. And honestly, this is actually being extremely generous. With how rampant inflation is right now, it's bound to be a lot more than that. Not to mention, you'll have way more money to invest, meaning that with a couple of decisions and a bit of luck, this could be anywhere between an extra $150 to $2,000 you'll have saved up by the time you're 30. This is enough to quit the rat race and pursue your dreams, to travel the world, to put a down payment on a house. Heck, ironically, it's even enough to actually be able to buy and own a car outright if you want one. Instead of this current system of being forced and coerced into getting into massive amounts of debt to pay for increasingly expensive car payments. That is what is at stake here, and what you guys are already beautifully exposing and fighting back against. Just continue to stay on point, stay relentless, and I have no doubt that one day, eventually, we'll end this illusion of a free market that's really just modern slavery in disguise.